And it's like, I think,
There we
there
go.
we are. We are now live. Good evening and welcome wherever you are. Good evening, good day, good afternoon. I'm Sheila Balgobin and I am the Dream Decipherer. And I help you to crack the code of your sleep and dreams so you can sleep sound and dream deep. Tonight is a bit of an extension of my series on trauma, the body, and sleep. And I have a special guest here with me this evening. His name is Phillip Cohen, and he's a sleep specialist. And we're just going to chat a little bit about about sleep, its relationship to trauma, which is how Philip and I met, and how the body mind must be can be invoked to encourage healing. So, Philip, I am going to let you introduce yourself, and you go ahead. There you go.
All right. Thanks, Sheila. Thanks for including me in this program. And hello to everyone out there. Hope you've had a lovely weekend.
Oops.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
been a therapist for nearly 40 years. And it's only in the last few years that I've started working on sleep because in my work over the 40 years, it has shown to that sleep is often an underlying disorder in many anxiety and depressed patients. So that's where it started.
So you began working primarily
As a
with anxiety
clinical,
and
yeah,
depression. Okay.
clinical therapist in psychologist in private practice,
Right.
and yeah, when I came to the UK, I did a specialization in hypnotherapy and sleep uh, therapy, which is what I'm doing now. Yeah.
Okay. So what was it? Was it a practical experience with your clients that made you realize that the sleep was um, more important than people perhaps give it credence? And that, I think that's true in the general public, actually.
Yeah, it often appeared that, when I got a referral, that sleep wasn't even one of the things that were part of the symptomatology. And yet when I worked with people in the long term, sleep was evident as one of the major issues
Yeah.
in all sorts of disorders. So it
Yes.
became something that I focused on even in my therapy, because if you have short sleep or a lack of sleep, it really impacts every single thing in your life.
Well, there's a one fact that when I give talks to people and I say, wait, give some interesting sleep facts about sleep. One of the facts is that lack of sleep will kill you faster than lack of food.
Yeah.
People are shocked when I tell them that, but
Oh, that's
yes,
true. Yeah.
because the brain literally flips out because
Right.
it's not able to get rid of debris, which means it's forming
Correct.
plaque, which can lead to Alzheimer's and dementia. It can't consolidate memory, and it just starts to misfire. And I think from your point of view, you look at sleep from the point of view of more of neuroscience.
Right.
And I think that would be helpful to talk a little bit about that because it's becoming more and more evident from neuroscience research
Yeah.
that the body and mind function as one
A-
unit.
Absolutely. So if I try to summarize, and maybe the book I just recommended to you, I can recommend to everyone. If you're
Sure,
really interested in the neuroscience, this book is very, very important. Um, and maybe we can just put it in the chat or
sure.
whatever.
Hmm.
Um, but let me try and summarize. So sleep, the little known facts are that if we don't get to REM sleep, none of the things you've just described actually happen.
Absolutely.
It, the
That's
brain
right.
doesn't clear, you don't dream, you don't have all of that. That's very, very important process occurring
That's right.
because it happens in the last 2 to 2.5 hours of of an 8-hour period.
Mm-hmm.
So what's very important is that sleep occurs, or the stages of sleep occur every 90 minutes
Yes, that's
in
right.
you know, in rotation. So in the beginning, we're talking about preparing to get us to deeper sleep. So the first 4 stages are non-REM sleep, non-rapid eye movement sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And those in the first 2 or 3 or 4 rotations of 90 minutes, REM sleep only occurs for a very short time in the 90 minutes, right at the end. So if we don't get down to deep sleep, which is the 4th stage of non-REM sleep, you don't get to REM sleep.
Absolutely. And I know that from working with clients as a drug and alcohol counselor,
Yes,
that
exactly.
when they were taking their drinking or taking drugs, they
Correct.
were not dreaming. They were
Correct.
going to such a deep level of sleep that, like you said, that the normal stages of sleep get bypassed completely, and they're at the very deep. I think they're like delta waves, which is almost
Right.
like unconscious.
Right.
And but interestingly enough, when they finally do get off the drink and the drugs, they start to dream,
Yeah.
and it's constant, and
Right.
it's overwhelming because that unconscious material floods up to such an extent that they start to, well, people think they're hallucinating. It's the unconscious mind breaking into everyday reality, and they just can't handle it. So it's,
Right.
there's
So
all
there's a
kinds of
difference.
evidence.
There's a bit of a difference, Sheila, between deep sleep and that sort of anesthetization, which is
Yes.
really, it's more unconscious than actual good
Well,
sleep.
that's what I
It's
mean.
not
That's what I
good
said.
sleep.
It's like they're passed out,
Right.
rather than in a deep sleep.
Correct. And deep sleep is very important because the physical body goes into almost paralysis, but the brain kicks into very vital processes,
Hmm.
and
That's right.
it's not a passive process. So in a night of sleep, the energy that you might save is actually, by one author's view, the amount that's in a chocolate bar. That's how active the brain is actually.
Yes, it's
So
it is quite active because, like
right,
you
it's
said, all
very
of
active.
these processes
Correct.
that can only take place at night,
In
are
certain
going on, and
stages.
the brain
Right.
is the, the band leader
Correct. Correct.
orchestrating everything.
Exactly. So
But mhm,
so alcohol, coffee, all those things can affect those stages, but the yeah, uh, it's not deep sleep. That kind of
it's
unconsciousness is
yeah,
literally, your brain is also knocked out, and that's the problem.
yeah. No, I mean, what I think it might be interesting here is to look at this, what we were talking about, this body mind connection,
Right.
which is part of neuroscience. But I mean, even though me as a non neuroscientist have come to realize that memory and
Mm.
the body, and whether it be for traumatic reasons or not, are all linked.
Yeah.
And I've even had experiences, not just my clients, but my own
Yeah.
experiences, where I've
Right.
had memory triggered by an injury.
Right.
And
Right.
from years ago, in some cases, people have even experience memories from other lifetimes locked in the body. So I'd like to explore that a little bit, because I don't think
Mm.
people seem to think we're all kind of these talking heads with
Yeah.
no bodies
Especially now
attached.
with
Yeah,
this kind of streaming. Yeah.
exactly.
You don't have a body anymore.
Yeah, but I mean, let's like talk about that a little bit.
Okay, so that's an extension of, or well, let's put it this way: the work that I'm doing now is really about how stress,
Mm,
and by stress I mean any kind of stressor,
sure.
lands up sitting in the body.
Hmm.
And the thing that's bandied about, which is a wonderful saying, is What fires together wires together.
Yes.
So if two neurons fire together in the brain so often, that will remain as almost a hardwired situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So if
it
you
actually wears if you think of it of a path running from one place to the other, the path starts to get deeper and rutted because it's being used so
exactly,
much. So
exactly,
it becomes that much stronger.
right. And
But
so
mhm,
essentially, if you anything can become an anxiety provoking event. That's why if you been bitten by a dog once and you had this injury, landed up in hospital and you had to have tetanus injection, every time you hear a dog bark, that sets off the same trauma in your
mhm,
brain, and then those two things will wire together in your brain, and wherever you had that injury would probably hurt 20 years later when
yes,
the same kind of dog or same kind of bark appears. And that's the
yes.
most simple explanation.
Yes, I mean, and that's exactly what these experiences are. They have become locked. We use the example of Pavlov's dogs.
Exactly.
They hear a bell ring and they'd start to salivate because they
Right.
associated the sound with food.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the trauma. Whether it was, and it what may seem relatively mild to one person can be an
Absolutely.
enormous trauma to someone else.
Right.
I remember reading years ago an example of talking about counseling people who have been through trauma. And there was a gentleman who he was a fireman and had seen all kinds of terrible things, but um, what really traumatized him was doing some DIY, and he like sliced off a bit of his finger. And that traumatized him much more than all of the terrible stuff he would see at work. So there's no um, right trauma or wrong
Exactly.
trauma or big
Exactly.
trauma. It's trauma,
Right.
period.
So we often forget that when we're dealing with things like stress. What
Mhm.
stresses one person may not stress another. I had a
Exactly.
patient in South Africa who came into a crisis center because she couldn't sleep for 3 days.
Mm.
And this might sound ridiculous, but because she couldn't make a decision about a couch that she wanted, there were two, and she couldn't decide. She didn't sleep for 3 days. That was an incredible trauma.
Yeah.
It affected her sleep, which is what we're talking about. So, how does anxiety stop us from sleeping? Well, it's very simple. Neurologically, if the brain does not distinguish between something that we imagine or hold in our head as a perception and a reality.
Well, that's the thing about the lovely thing about our minds is that it will believe what we tell it.
Exactly.
So I mean, and if we've got what I call mental malware
Yeah,
rattling around in our brains, then it will use that wrong inputted information to
correct.
respond to whatever is
Correct.
the task is at hand. So, and what people don't seem to forget basic biology, in that what one cell knows,
Yeah,
every cell knows because they're
right.
all connected by the interstitial fluid. So
Correct.
all of that fluid that they float around in and do their thing in is a means of communication. So what
Correct.
one cell knows, they all know.
Right.
And this is why trauma, on at least at a physiological level, can get locked anywhere and it usually goes to the weakest point
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
system, the weakest link, so to speak.
Correct. So yeah, I think I love that what you said. I've heard it in your previous broadcasts. This idea of what one cell knows, every cell knows,
Mm,
because that really tells us how the mind and the body are so connected. Because we're mainly this body of water, and everything is transported in the blood to everywhere, and including the nerves. and the
Mm-hmm.
nerves go up and down. And so it can be that the injury or the dog bite is actually, it tells the brain you got to react here, or the brain can say, that was a terrible thing and it must never happen again, because the brain is looking out for us. So
It be,
everything that the brain looks at has to be seen through this lens of trauma or not
or
trauma. Sorry,
experience in general. I mean,
correct.
whatever
And
the
it
experience may be. Yeah.
and it looks at everything in a negative fashion because
Mm-hmm.
it needs to keep us alive. So it has to cast its view on everything as potential threat. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what stress is.
Yeah.
So if we're calm, if we're relaxed, if we haven't had too much trauma in our life, the brain kicks into its cortex and it goes through things and it says, no, that's not a real threat. That's just a dog. And that's okay. And
Mm-hmm.
what happened before is in the past. But if you're constantly stressed, then everything that happens today may, and little things may spark that off, which
Sure.
means that tonight you the brain has had this sense that there's threat all around,
Mm-hmm.
and you will sleep with one eye open,
Sure.
which means you won't go down into the depth of deep sleep, delta waves, as you said, and you definitely won't get to REM sleep because everything will wake you up. You're
Sure.
sleeping very
You're hyper
lightly.
vigilant.
You're
Yeah.
hyper vigilant. You're
Yes.
sleeping with one eye open,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's the connection between sleep disorders and sleep problems and stress.
Well, I mean, the stress doesn't necessarily have to be occurring even in your waking state. The stress could be occurring in your sleeping state. I mean,
Sure,
due to physical reasons. It could
sure.
be due to
Pain,
pain. If you've exercised too late, if you ate too late, you took,
right?
took
Food,
drugs.
exactly.
So there's different reasons. But what um, I find fascinating about all of this is that what I have seen and experienced with my clients is that what doesn't get expressed and acknowledged
Right,
openly will
right.
go into the body,
Yeah,
which is why you may have people they're worried well, and they've always got these aches and pains, and they even call it now non-defined pain. I forget, there's a medical term that they call.
yeah. I'm sure.
Basically, they don't know. um, and I remember one client of mine, she had terrible, terrible problems with her ears, with all kinds of surgery and whatnot over the years. And one day, but she would have massage, it would get better. And even
Hmm.
her vision would, kind of improve. And I said, well, let me just ask you something. Who is it that you don't want to listen to?
Aha.
And she thought about it for a second. And she says, well, there's this woman at work. She rabbits on and on and on, talking really rubbish stuff. And I've got work to do. And I stopped her and said, well, have you ever said that to her?
Mm.
And she's like, well, not really. And I said, well, yeah. And your ears are literally blocking her out.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think once she made that connection, I mean, the damage to her ears had been long term. So, I mean, it wasn't that it was going to clear up overnight, but certainly she noticed an improvement
Yeah,
in, the
exactly.
pain and discomfort, because that irritation had become somatized and she didn't recognize it anymore.
Yeah,
And this is what I mean. People, oh, no, 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 we don't have anything wrong with our heads. No, but it all goes into the body.
right, right. And then with the separation as we described, we leave it in the body and we don't
Yes.
complete the process because
Hmm.
we all have stress. We all
Sure.
have things that we have to deal with. But as you say, if you don't express it, if you don't find a way to deal with what's happened, it lands up sticking somewhere.
Yeah, the energy has to go someplace. Like they
Right,
say, scientists say matter is neither created nor destroyed. It
right.
just changes form.
So
So
we
it
can't we
goes
can't
into the
ask
body.
for, yeah, we can't ask for stress to be eliminated.
No.
because that's not going to happen. So we
No.
have to get better at dealing with it.
Well, Philip, to be honest, we need at least a little bit of stress. If not,
Mm,
we would
mm,
just be little blobs laying on the floor with
right,
unable to move. So even to stand erect, we need a
exactly.
little bit of stress in our muscles. So,
Right,
and there's, think about a wedding. It's a stress. Oh yes, it can be a real stress, but it's still stress. It's maybe a happy stress, but nevertheless it can stress, especially if one partner is late for the wedding or something happens. So stress can take different forms, and I think people don't always recognize when
yeah,
they're stressed or when
right,
faced with a situation that's actually putting stress on them.
right. So when you stopped your client and said, focus on your ears and said, what is it saying? That's the work we have to do, because
Yes.
then you
Yeah,
complete the action. Then, so if you're unconsciously saying, stop talking to me, can you say it in other words so that
yeah.
it can be heard? And that would be the process that I would work
Yes,
with
exactly.
many clients.
I mean,
um,
and that I have found, whether I was working with bereavement clients or addiction clients or whatever kind of client that was before me, is was important that they reconnected and stopped being headless horsemen
yeah, yeah,
or talking heads and joined the two back together.
yeah,
I think of a client of mine when I was doing addiction counseling, and it was like there were certain triggers that you knew that would want to drink. One was when Arsenal was losing, but that's another story.
yeah,
But um, and I said, well, let's change the response to that trigger. So I said, what, when you think of it, makes you feel really good inside? And it was his mother's apple pie, believe it or not. And he wasn't American,
sure,
he was a Brit, but he loved his mom's apple pie. And so whenever that trigger started to kind of dance around in the back of his head, he would think of the pie instead of, I need a drink. And
right.
slowly started to wear a new neural
Ah,
pathway,
brilliant.
to actually be
Yeah,
able to, I mean, we had to unpick other stuff as well, but
yeah,
there was that basically needed to be in a place where he felt secure.
right. And I'm pleased you raised that, because the other important thing is, because the brain is looking and scanning for threat, we have to teach the brain to look for the what's good.
Yes.
And in my work right now, that's an important part of any kind of therapy, is
Sure.
getting people to look at what's good,
Yes.
because that's so difficult in
Especially
stressful
these
times.
days. Yeah.
COVID all around with this invisible
This,
enemy.
that, the
We're already
government,
right. Exactly. We're
it's just everything and everybody,
exactly
and they cut you off on the way to work as well. So,
right. And so it accumulates, and
yeah.
we don't really see the good. And it's not, not so much. I'm not a fan. Well, I mean, it's fine to do, these. I forget what it's called now, gratitude journals and things like that. That's fine, but
Mm,
actually, we have to actively look in our day, or we have to mine it for the good thing
yes.
that happens.
Well, I said one of the things that I like to tell my clients is to, well, two things. One is to learn at least one new thing
Yeah,
every
good,
day.
good.
And the other thing is, before you go to sleep, try to think of at least three good things
Yeah,
that happened
and
in your
that's very
day.
helpful. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, because it's all great that it's all up here, and we
Yeah,
live up here in our heads so much now, especially since we're online so much
yeah,
and have to stay away from each other
yeah,
still,
yeah,
that the body gets left behind. And if for any change I have found to really take hold and be a substantive and permanent change,
yeah,
the body has to know something is going on.
yeah,
You
yeah.
can talk forever, but if the body isn't walking the talk, it
Right.
means nothing.
Yeah. So
Uh,
a lot of the stress that we feel um, sits in very known places, like
mhm.
your neck. Now, if
Oh
you
yeah.
have a stiff neck, you're not articulating properly. I have terrible neck problems often because I um, struggle with expressing fully what I
Mm,
feel. And I've had to work on it in my own therapy for the last 20 years. I'm much
mm,
better at it now. But still, if I get stressed, that's where it'll hit me. And then I have to stop and say, what
mm.
am I holding here in my throat
Yes,
that I
absolutely.
can't open
Yeah.
my mouth, or
Yes.
even get it past my
Hmm.
throat. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. I think because I come at therapy from a more energetic side. So I feel energy in myself and in other people. I'm an intuitive that way. But I notice that when um, I tell people with it, they've got something going on and they can't figure it out. I was like, ask it. And they're like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I said, well, let me give you an
Yeah.
example. A girl, one client of mine, was coming to me and she said, I don't know what it is. I keep getting sick. It's cold bugs, cold flu, one after the other. So I said, okay, what's happening? Is the cat okay? Yeah, cat's okay. Boyfriend okay? Yeah, boyfriend okay. Mother okay? We're more or less okay. Okay. So I said, all right, fine. Ask your immune system. You can do it silently or out loud. Ask your immune system, why is it calling your attention like
Right.
this?
Right.
So she goes away. She has a treatment with me. She goes away, and I see her about a month later, which for her next treatment. And so I said, "Well, so what happened? Did you ask your immune system what was going on?" She started laughing. And I'm like, okay, so what was that about then? She said, well, I got an answer. And I said, of course you got an answer. So what was the answer? She said, my immune system informed me that the reason why it was acting up is because I had nothing else to gripe and bitch about.
Lovely. That's a great story.
Which was brilliant. And I said, but if you ask, I mean, especially when you've got these things that the doctors can't figure out, you can't figure out. I've had things like that where I knew the pain of whatever it was so outside and outsized and so ridiculous. I said, no, there's something I need to know here, because
Mm.
this pain is just too much for what the injury, whatever it is, could be. And when I would ask, I would get an answer,
Of
and you
course.
will get an answer. You may see it in the newspaper, you may hear it on the radio, somebody may say something to you, but as soon as you hear it, you know.
Right. And
And
so yeah.
that's when the pain actually starts to go away,
Right.
because you have acknowledged it and recognized it, and it's like, okay, you got the message now. You don't need me anymore. I'm gone.
Correct.
I'm out of here.
So yeah, no, I think that's a vital element of what we're talking about in terms of treatment. Awareness of what's going on in our body
Hmm.
becomes the imperative. If
Yeah.
we don't know, and a lot of people are not connected, they are so numbed out because it's been trauma after trauma or anxiety after anxiety, and the
Mm.
body is a bad neighborhood. They don't want to go there.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
they'll do
It's
everything
interesting
they
that you
can.
put it that way. It's a bad neighborhood, and I'm not going there, but you live there, man.
Right. You're walking
You
through it
actually live in
every
that
single
neighborhood.
day.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And I think that I see we've come up to just about the half hour mark, and I
right.
think it's a good place to actually kind of stop and to put as a reminder that we are our bodies. It's not, we're not just what we think. We are what we
Right.
are.
Right.
And if you don't pay attention and to the body, it can turn on you,
Yeah.
quite frankly.
And it will get tougher on you as you ignore it,
Oh
and
yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
So
Yep.
suddenly you're going to get a big smack on the head, which is an
Or a
illness.
kick in the butt, which I
Right, there
usually
we
get
go.
knocked flat in the
Thank you.
street. I usually get knocked flat. So yeah, I
Exactly,
get it.
exactly.
But thank you for that. I think that,
Pleasure.
to give people, at least get them thinking about how to join head and body back
Yeah,
together, and
right.
to really be able to heal situations, to heal trauma.
Yeah,
You have to involve the whole person and not just part of
absolutely.
them.
Mm.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. That was
Fantastic. Thank you so
very
much,
interesting.
Philip. I've really enjoyed our talk. We always have a good time.
Yeah.
And I said, well, maybe, in fact, before we go, if people wanted to find out more about your work, how can they reach you?
So best to look me up on LinkedIn.
Okay.
That's my, that has the most information.
Okay.
Otherwise,
Hmm.
www.sleep-alchemy.com,
Ooh,
which is
sleep
the website.
alchemy.
Yeah,
Whoa.
yeah,
I like that.
that's my website. So you can just put in sleep-alchemy.com
Okay,
and
great.
find out more about sleep specifically. But LinkedIn has more of my, my history and my CV and whatever.
Fantastic. Thank you
Good.
so much for joining me this evening. I'm hoping that maybe it will generate some questions, and you have to come back.
I
I think
will.
that would be fun.
Thank you for including me.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. And I hope you'll have a brilliant week to come. And I'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye bye.